Mr. Speaker.
I call Grant Robertson on
Mr.
the vote.
Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those who still have some ability to hear after Mr. Bennett's speech, can I just make the point that Stuart Nash, when he mentioned the GST rate, he made a small error. And the reason he made that error was because he made the mistake of believing John Key. He made the mistake of believing John Key, who told New Zealanders there would be no increase in GST. It was his read my lips moment. He said, read my lips, there'll be no increase in GST. And what did he do, Mr. Speaker, when he got into power? He increased GST to 15%. And this is the same John Key who, when David Bennett gets up and says, oh, be fearful of what new taxes might arrive, well, look in the mirror. Mr. Bennett, actually don't look in the mirror. Very dangerous exercise if you're David Bennett. Look across the caucus, Mr. Bennett, and you'll see the new taxes that the National Party have brought in. So let's just run through the new taxes that they brought in. Firstly, we have effectively, with the Bright Line test, a new tax, albeit a tax that's going to be completely ineffective in the job that it was asked to do of trying to control the out-of-control speculation in our property market. And in fact, the Select Committee, during the process of this bill, Mr. Speaker, heard that the Bright Line test will probably bring in, what was it, around $5 million? Maybe $5 million, if that. They were told by Treasury to make it a 5-year Bright Line test. They've only made it a 2-year one, Mr. Speaker, so a new tax, albeit, but an ineffective one as well. Then we've also got the border tax that was brought in by the National Party in the last budget, the tax on all passengers coming over the border. But of course, no new taxes, Mr. Speaker. That was what David Bennett told us. Then we've also had the levy on telecommunication providers, and we had John Key speculating about another new tax, the land tax, Mr. Speaker. So John Key's now introduced a 4th tax, and then this bill, which creates the 5th new tax from the National Party. So for David Bennett to stand up in front of this House and say, be fearful about people making promises about increasing taxes, he needs to own the fact that his government has broken the promise that they made to New Zealanders on that score. Mr. Speaker, on this bill, there are 2 or 3 things that I want to say. The first of those is that we will be supporting this legislation, as we have done with other pieces of tax legislation brought forward by this government, because it takes steps, timid steps, towards dealing with some of the issues that are affecting our taxation system. And in particular, it is one of the new taxes, the introduction of GST on online services. And as other colleagues have said during this debate, the goal stated by the Inland Revenue Department and by the government was to create a level playing field. To create a level playing field when it comes to taxation. And so for some companies in New Zealand, they'll be delighted when this passes. I'm thinking here particularly of Spark, who will be looking and saying, this is great, we're going to be able to put our offering in terms of Lightbox on the same footing as Netflix. Absolutely terrific, well done, tick in that box. But if we go down to Unity Books in Wellington, if Simon Bridges goes down to Unity Books in Wellington and he makes sure that he buys well, you know, he would go down there. He wants to get the complete set of Nancy Drew novels, because that's what Simon's been looking for all these years. They're good books, don't get me wrong, they're good books. But he's gone down there to get the complete set of Nancy Drew novels. He fancies himself as a bit of a detective. He's going down there to do that. Now, when he goes down there to do that, he might stop for a minute and think, hang on, can I order these as an e-book? Can I order these as an e-book for my Kindle? That's what Simon Bridges might be thinking. Now, when he goes and says, right, I'm going to get the Nancy Drew novels as an e-book on my Kindle, the charge will apply. But then, if he decides to order a hard copy book, because we know he likes to have them on beside his bed at night, piled up there, the Nancy Drew books, we all want them, don't we? Yes, that's right, but Simon Bridges particularly wants them. If he goes and buys those and gets them imported over here, no GST there. No GST there, but there will be at Unity Books. And that's the problem, Mr. Speaker, is the level playing field hasn't been created for the main street booksellers. It hasn't been created. And some of the best submissions we got in this committee were from Retail New Zealand and members of Retail New Zealand who came and said, we're finding it hard to compete. We want some support from the government. We understand and we accept the logic of a level playing field, but that didn't happen. And so there is no level playing field for those main street retailers who cannot ensure that GST is charged on imported goods coming overseas. So by all means on intangibles, that is a step forward, but the government has missed out here when it comes to truly creating a level playing field. Mr. Speaker, the other matter I want to refer to is the introduction around a resident land withholding tax. And it's been mentioned before by my colleague Stuart Nash that this fits into the broader tax program that the government brought in terms of the Bright Line test and the other issues that we will soon see some information from around the requirement for people to have a bank account number, and an IRD number when they're purchasing property from offshore. And very soon, Mr. Speaker, we will have that information about the impact of foreign buyers. And John Key's softening up the New Zealand public, suspicious he might actually know how many people are going to be identified in that list of foreign buyers, and he's concerned about the New Zealand public's reaction to that. And so might he be, and that's why he's raised the idea of a land tax. But, Mr. Speaker, as a package, this is weak. It's not really going to deal with the speculation that is pushing house prices up, making them utterly unaffordable, pushing up the house price to income ratio to 10 to 1, nearly one of the highest in the world in Auckland. Property values going up by $100,000 this year, out of reach of most New Zealanders. And the national government continues to act in the interest of the speculators, act in the interest of those who are not in part of the productive economy, those at the very top, but not the majority of New Zealanders, the New Zealanders who want to get into the property market. And these measures, Mr. Speaker, are inadequate when it comes to trying to deal to that. And they're part of a tax work program. The resident land withholding tax is part of a tax work program that the government had put to it by IRD through 2014 and 2015. And they accepted the resident land withholding tax. But what's not here, Mr. Speaker, is action to crack down on those who avoid their tax, those who evade their tax. And that sat in the very same work program as the resident land withholding tax. And the government ignored the advice that IRD gave them. It was worse than that. IRD started a program of work to review the taxation of foreign trusts. They started that program of work in 2013 and 2014 along with the resident land withholding tax. And it was going swimmingly, Mr. Speaker, until about November 2014, when a report went to the Minister of Revenue and said, we're going to be with you on this review of taxation in December 2015. And right there at the end of November 2014, along came John Key and his personal trust advisor, Ken Whitney. They intervened. They got to Todd McClay, and Todd McClay got to the officials, and all of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, the work program that IRD had, where they said that the review of foreign taxation rules was a key focus, all of a sudden it was gone. And respected officials from the Inland Revenue Department who have worked hard on legislation like this were forced to write to their colleagues that the minister had stopped the review of foreign trusts. What we should be seeing, Mr. Speaker, is legislation coming to this House that cracks down on those multinational companies who do not pay their fair share, and that restores New Zealand's reputation as a place of integrity when it comes to tax, that gets rid of our reputation as a tax haven in respect of foreign trusts. That's the legislation that should be in front of the House today. That's the work that was in the work program of IRD until Todd McClay got his writing instructions from the Prime Minister's trusted advisor to get rid of that. This is a missed opportunity, this legislation, Mr. Speaker. This should have been about our tax system being robust, being ready for the 21st century, supporting our main street retailers and restoring our reputation, and it fails on all counts. The National Party's out of touch, in my view, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the impact of taxation and how to make the best of taxation to support a productive economy in New Zealand. This is a piecemeal, tokenistic effort from the government, and one that the Labor Party supports, but reluctantly so.
I call